Afrikaners are a peculiar bunch of people. In a previous episode of Fact Sheet, I discussed the phenomenon of stereotypes, and I made the point that sometimes even negative stereotypes contain an element of truth. I also pointed to the observation that we tend to embrace and even cherish positive stereotypes, while we tend to reject negative stereotypes for the mere fact that they are stereotypes. This doesn't make sense. Although we can easily describe this discrepancy to human nature, and correctly so, it doesn't change the fact that it's a logical inconsistency. For example, as an Afrikaner, I cherish the stereotypes about my own community as hardworking, patriotic people who tend to be religious and who enjoy being close to nature. On the other hand, I am usually offended by the stereotypes of my own community as people who tend to be stubborn, flag-waving reactionaries who find it hard to embrace change. Afrikaners are a unique people, and for a variety of reasons. In this episode of Fact Sheet, I will point to some of the reasons why I think we are so different. Afrikaners are Africans, but we are also Westerners. We are Africans because we became a people in Africa. We have been in Africa for hundreds of years since our ancestors, who were of European descent, came to Africa. It is here in Africa where we became who and what we are. We are not Dutch, nor are we German, French, or British. We are Afrikaners. We are also attached to the African continent and the soil beneath our feet, to the extent that we even named ourselves after the continent. Even though the Afrikaners are generally known across the world as the Boers, and even though we don't mind that description, we tend to refer to ourselves as Afrikaners. However, we are also Westerners. We are Christians, at least most of us are, and to a significant extent we embrace the Christian tradition. Even those among us who are not Christians are usually quick to agree that they also embrace Christian values. As is the case with the West in general, we have also been significantly shaped by the philosophical thought of the ancient Greeks and the political and legal thought of the ancient Romans. We've been in Africa since 1652, which is more than a century before the United States of America was founded. Having been in the southern tip of Africa for so long, we missed the French Revolution. But not only the French Revolution, we even missed the Enlightenment. Now, some might find that alarming, especially those who regard the Enlightenment as the beginning of the liberation of mankind. But the Enlightenment was much more, or perhaps we should say much less than that. The Enlightenment was also a time in history which led to the development of ideologies such as liberalism, eventually socialism, and eventually postmodernism. Why is this significant? Because it explains why Afrikaners are generally conservative. One of our mottos, as expressed by one of our heroes named Father Kestel, is "A volk red homself," meaning a nation saves itself. We believe in self-help, in doing things ourselves. Even though our academics and lawyers place significant emphasis on things like human rights, culturally we tend to place much more emphasis on things like family loyalty, duties, responsibilities, and a sense of community. Generally, we regard self-sacrifice for a greater cause as the ultimate virtue, which is why we are inspired by stories like that of William Wallace and King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans. Ever since 1652, there hasn't been a generation of Afrikaners who were not involved in some form of an armed conflict in order to survive. Our generation would be the first, even though our struggle is different. Our generation's struggle is not an armed conflict. It is a race against time to build resilient community institutions and to withstand an unprecedented propaganda onslaught against our people. We tried central planning when we built the white minority government in South Africa. And even though we can say that our intentions were noble, it failed, spectacularly and on a global stage. For decades, we were the scapegoats of global politics, or at least that's how we perceived it. For decades, every mistake we made, be it big or small, was put under the magnifying glass and then amplified from the rooftops, while our significant contributions to improve this country was swept under the carpet. We learned that, according to the zeitgeist, or the mainstream narrative, if you will, politically, you can only talk about the bad things done by Afrikaners, while it is regarded as extremely politically incorrect to discuss the contributions of the Afrikaners, of which there are obviously many. This led us to conclude that in a way we are on our own, that if we want a future, in other words, we better do it ourselves. In the early 1990s, we, or should I say many of us, enthusiastically embraced the idea of a liberal, democratic, unitary state with a central government presiding over a large territory. But more importantly, a central government elected through a liberal, democratic, one-man, one-vote system to govern over a variety of cultural communities, languages, and religions. We were disillusioned. We learned that the system didn't work. South Africa is unraveling on a global stage, and again, spectacularly so. It's unfortunate that those who pushed us so hard to embrace the system that we currently have in South Africa are now evidently silent and now seem to turn a blind eye to the epic levels of state failure that we are witnessing in South Africa. We have learned through experience that imperialism doesn't work, that prescribing to people how they should govern themselves doesn't work, that telling people that their cultures are wrong and they need to adapt to a new way of thinking in order to make progress doesn't work. But most importantly, through experience, we have learned a very important lesson that most of the Western world is yet to learn. This lesson is difficult to explain, but it includes that you should not take for granted the things you have. It includes that promoting state dependency will inevitably lead to catastrophe. It includes that culture and identity, in the broad and the narrow sense of the word, is the solution much more than it is the problem. And perhaps most importantly, it includes that the only sustainable way for a community to prosper is to become what we call state-proof, and to build and run your own community institutions developed outside the sphere of the state, by your community, for your community. We have also learned that the only sustainable way to do this is through encouraging peaceful coexistence and mutual recognition and respect. We don't have much luxury for abstract philosophical debate. Our existence has been threatened for quite some time. And in this state of being threatened, in this state of not having an alternative, we have discovered that our power really does lie within. My name is Ernst, and this is your fact sheet.